Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And if anybody joins late, we'll catch them up, or they can watch the video and see what they missed. So, right at the end of June, we rolled out a new release with a bunch of changes to the jobs portal. And we're going to go over those changes today. Like I just said a few minutes ago, we've got everybody muted just because the feedback can get a little wild in a webinar, but you always have permission to unmute yourself and ask a question or use the chat feature. Deb's monitoring the chat and she will let me know when a question comes in, and we will do our best to address and answer that question. And I love your questions because you guys ask the best questions. So don't hesitate to ask, especially if I'm not being very clear. I tend to ramble. I know that is a problem. So don't be embarrassed or shy. Keep me honest and on point. So thank you for that. So let's get started, and I'll work my way through the release notes. I did catch a typo, two typos at the end, and I will point those out as we go through the release notes. So we are going to start with the changes on the applicant search screen first. You probably all noticed when you go to applicant search, there's a new column where it says notes. We added the notes column so that all users, whether it be an HR admin, an HR district admin if you're one of the co-op users, or just a hiring manager, so a principal or whatnot, has the ability to add a comment to an applicant record. Because right now, only someone who has the role of HR admin or district admin could actually see this little edit button, open a record, and go to the comments tab and actually add a physical comment. And districts were using file screens to add comments, but you had to add a score, and not everybody wanted to have to add a score. They just wanted to add a comment. So we added this new feature called Notes, and you just click it open, and you can go in and you can just press New Item and type your note, your comment. And when you save it, we'll look at the one I added earlier, it's going to tell you who added the comment. And here's your comment below. We'll just edit the one just testing out, added a note to this applicant's file. And this data, this comment, will then be added to the bottom, near the bottom of the applicant summary. So that's all it is. Simple as that. Just to show you the difference, HR admin, they see all these additional columns, and someone with just a supervisor role, it looks a little bit like this. They don't have all those, the disclosure hits and all that shows up, but they just see the notes. Simple as that. So hopefully that makes sense, but it's a way that you can just add a quick note. You could use it for screening or whatever you deem appropriate on your site. The other thing that we did with the applicant search was districts that have been using file screens for a long time. When you had more than 10 on the old view, they dropped off. You couldn't access old ones. Well, we modified and fixed the screen, and actually the screen now shows up to 20. And if you for some reason have more than 20, you'll now get the paid, you'll get the little, I don't know what you call this thing, but the paid, page one of, it'll show you more than one page so that you can see all file screens that belong to an applicant's record. So they're no longer dropping out of view. They're all available to you. So we fixed that problem for districts that have a lot of file screens associated with applicants. So that was another little improvement, basically fix to the job system. Okay, that's kind of it for now on applicant search. We do have another release that'll be coming out. I believe it's in September, and there'll be more specifically to applicant search. So let's talk about user files. It's been a pain in our tushy forever that when an applicant changed their name, like got married or for some reason had a change to their last name, you would go into documents, you would try to open them, and you would get a 404 error. You couldn't, the file wouldn't open. You would see it there, but you couldn't access it. And the reason was those files were in the folder associated with the applicant's old last name. Well, we have a really awesome programmer that we're at SDS, our lead programmer, Dave. We explained to him the whole situation, and he came up with a solution. All of our applicants have a user ID, and rather than storing files in a folder by their last name, they're now stored in a folder by their ID number. So if they change their last name, big deal. The folders are now in the same folder they always have been. So that's just been fixed. And if you're at all familiar where the folders live or the files live, it's under System Manager, under User Files. And you'll now start to see old data still going to live under their existing alpha. And he's built a patch to interpret, but new files are now being put under their ID number. So you shouldn't have an issue anymore if an applicant updates their last name. You're not going to get those 404 errors. And I know that that has plagued us since the beginning, and we used to get lots of tickets. So hopefully, if anything, you'll find that one improvement to be a big deal. I know Deb and we do. Okay. So now let's move on to job utilities. Another fix that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it kind of is, and it's more of anything, it's kind of a convenience. Close jobs. We teach our clients that they should come to job utilities, close jobs, to physically close open jobs. You're supposed to come here and look at your open until filled and your closed jobs and check them. Select the ones you want to close and then press the closed job button, and it'll update the status to closed. Well, people always said, well, if a job is open and once the close date passed, why doesn't it just close? Makes no sense that we still have to come and find it and close it. It comes off the job openings page on the close date. Why can't it close itself? Well, you guys are right. So the system now runs a check every night at midnight. It looks for jobs with the status of open, not open until filled, open, and it checks the close date. And if the close date is now true, so like today, if I had any jobs that say 7/15/2020 at midnight, the system would then run a little process and change any job that was open with today's close date at 12:01, its status would update from open to closed. So you don't have to think about that if the job is open. You'll have to come here and physically run the check and press the button for an open until closed job. But if your job is open and it has a close date, the system will physically close it for you all by itself now on the date. So that's an improvement as well. Okay. Any questions? I know I kind of moved fast. I want to get through this in an hour because I know you guys are busy. Okay. Now let's move on to job screening. Kind of excited. You'll notice right away a little color. We've added the ability for the system to highlight any job that has screening data associated with it. So you know right away which jobs you've added job screens to. So I always hated it when I'd come here. I'm like, okay, which jobs haven't I screened yet, or which ones have I started? So that's what this little green highlight indicates. These jobs we've added job screens to. This job I don't have any job screen data associated with. So it's a quick visual for you. But the more important thing that we've got going on in here, which job was I going to do? I have to remember I had one that I picked out. Hold on. 176. Okay. We've added a new default to your system that's pretty darn cool. If you have the role of HR director, or HR admin, sorry, you can set up a default and create a special screen that only users with HR admin can access. And we called it HR screen on here, but it's basically a screen for HR that you can kind of do a pre-screening of your applicants. And you can make it real simple like we did on our release site here. And you can use this to, and Deb might want to pop in here and help me be more eloquent in here. It's basically, you can go, when you have this default on, hiring managers will not ever see this screen or the results of this screen when you have your default turned on. Hiring managers can still use job screening and add other screens only after you've screened out and marked people okay. I hope that makes sense. So I can go in here for this job, for this language arts teacher, I can go and make sure that this person's actually qualified, meets the qualifications to actually teach a language arts position. If this person actually is qualified, I can say, yeah, they're qualified. Okay. Now, when my principal at this location at the junior high goes in, they would see Mary. Until I do that, they wouldn't think anybody has applied to this job. And then after I go and I review Testy Testerson's file, I can make sure that they too are also qualified to teach language arts. And if they are or are not, I can make that determination as an HR professional and choose whether or not. So that's kind of this new default really limits whether or not the hiring managers can see this individual. So like if I go in as a regular user, they couldn't access that HR screen. I don't know if I'm making sense or not. I'm kind of rambling. But then a regular user could come in. I've screened these people. I've got data. And then my regular user program manager could then go to job screening. That was job 176. These people have been screened. He could go in. He's the principal there. And he could now put in, he doesn't see the HR screen, but he could go in and add a certificated screen. And because I've cleared both those applicants, he could go in and start screening them as a teacher for his building, if that makes sense, hopefully. If there's questions, feel free, ask them away. That's kind of the idea behind that new default. If anybody's interested in that default or wants it set up on their site, just email support@schooldata.net and Deb and I can explain it a little better or just help you get it set up on your site so you can start using it. Or if you're really comfortable and want to do it yourself, by all means, but you just need to know where in your system to turn it on. So probably best to let us know. Okay, we're going to move on over to job interviews. Our release in March, we pushed out like 7 or 8 improvements to job interviews, and we're adding a few more now. We've gotten a ton of feedback over the past year on ways to improve that tool, And it's been great. We really value user feedback, and it's been interesting to see the things that people have asked for, and it's been fun to deliver, I guess would be the right word. So let's go and look at job interviews. So one thing that we've done and that was asked for was the ability, that's not the one I wanted because it doesn't give a very good example, sorry. We were asked if we could add a minimum and maximum score to the interview questions. So we did, and actually I'll show you in just a little bit in the lookup tables where you can establish that for all your questions. So we did that, but we also wanted to give you the ability after, we know that sometimes there needs to be a little flexibility. So even though we let you establish that in the lookup tables and kind of set it across the board, users with the HR admin role can augment it for an individual interview. So you still have the ability, even though you set it, you could go in and make changes for an individual interview if needed. So I've set it, but maybe I've decided for this particular instance, I want to make it, maybe change it or weight a question a little more this time. I can come in here and edit it before my actual interview with these particular applicants. Just like you would come in and update your sequence, I could rearrange my questions by coming in here and changing the order if needed. So you would make your changes. Maybe I wanted to make this one more 6 instead of 5 or 4, whatever I needed to do. So I could make my changes and then save them. And then I would save my sequence and I could print my questions. So that's your new minimum and maximum value. And then when I get to the screen where I actually record my scores and my comments, if I have any, the minimum and maximum value is also displayed there as well. So that's another update. And then when we go to actual recording, I'll show you it here. So when we're on the screen here, when you select your name and whoever you're going to be interviewing, here's that minimum and maximum score. I can come in here and I can quickly add my data. I'm just going to randomly put some data in here. I don't feel like typing comments, so I don't waste your guys' time. You can see that's all here now. I can save my scores. We've also added the ability to print a report for each member of your interview team, and it'll give you all the data that particular participant provided. So it's a recap. So HR director, what data did they provide for Brandy or Dana? It's all captured in that report, their scores or any comments. We did limit who has access to these reports. So only users with that HR admin role ever see these reports. So if I shadow over to my supervisor, so someone who's not an HR director, and I go to interviews, and I go to that same interview, you'll notice they're not an HR director. They don't see the other participants of that interview, and they don't have access to that, that report. We did that just to kind of limit liability, I guess would be a term, limit, it's that need to know attitude whenever dealing with hiring and trying to be, what's a good term? When we're working in HR, we don't just let everybody have access to everything. We want to control the knowledge and control the information. It's just kind of covering ourselves. So that's kind of the intention behind that. We'll give HR access to that, and then they can determine who needs to see it and who doesn't. Okay, so let's go back. Another improvement or update to the interview module is when you're done and everybody's put in their input with an interviewee, After the last person saves their data, the status will update to interviewed, as you can see here with Mr. Greg Hansen here, because HR directors added their data, program manager added his data, and Mr. No User ID added their data. So after the last person saved, the status now updates. Before it didn't, it just kind of stayed there with, yeah, they accepted their interview. And this can be helpful if you use, I know I have a few districts that use the interview tool for their subpools, and keeping track of who's been interviewed and who hasn't can get daunting. So to have the system automatically update the status after you've added scores and data should be helpful for you, so that you know that you're done with that individual. Okay, so that's job interviews. So let's move on to job recommendation. That's where we spent a bulk of our work with this release. And we did that because of our partnership with ReadySub. And we wanted to be able to accommodate the transfer of data between the two systems. So when you hire a sub, we want to be able to send data over to ReadySub, and also to send over your employee data over to ReadySub in the nightly syncs. So let's come here. So the idea being, when you get to that final step on your job recommendation, you need to be able to tell the system a little bit of information so that we can share that information with ReadySub. So let's open a job recommendation, and you'll see there's some new fields that have been added. But let me pause real quick before we go too far. Forever, there's not been a language file on the job recommendation edit screen. So it finally has been added. We just put generic language on there for now. We can show you how to edit that language, or you can ask us to put whatever language you would like on there. And the help file has been added. That was also missing from that screen. So that has been added. But let's scroll down to the bottom. So there are 3 new fields included on this screen. One of them is useful to everybody, whether or not you use ReadySub. And that one is this add substitute role. Historically, we've had the add employee role. So when you hire someone and they're an employee, you can have the system update their profile to include the role of employee. And we've had the ability to delete the role of substitute upon hire. But I don't know why we did not have the option to add the substitute role when you hired a sub. That has now been added to kind of accommodate that, to accommodate the workflow for the ReadySub piece. But even if you're not a ReadySub client, it's nice to be able to add that role to identify who within your site is a substitute. So when you check that box right before you press the hire button, that will add the role of substitute to that user's account. This ReadySub position field is new. If you're a district that uses the ReadySub substitute solution, when you hire a new employee, you can select the position that you want to share with ReadySub, because oftentimes that position might be slightly different than the position you're using within your own system. They might have a slightly different name, or they're slightly simplified, or this position might be truer to an assignment, so to speak. I know some districts, like the position might be very generic that you're hiring into. It might be just teacher, but the position you want to share with ReadySub might be first grade teacher. So, we can talk about that. I know when we're setting up with ReadySub, there's a whole process, and we have a lot more conversation, but that's what that new position is for, field. And likewise with location, while we were working with some of the first sites to get set up, we noticed that our locations don't always neatly match up. Examples, We have some of our employees, when we hire them, their location is district office, but when we're setting them up in ReadySub, the location is much more specific, like human resources or business office. And we don't necessarily want to add those to our hrmPlus system. So rather than having a bunch of new positions added, the more simple solution was to create a separate location table specific to the ReadySub solution. So that's what those new fields are. All right, so that's the new fields that were added to the job recommendation piece. We're going to travel to employee information real quick. In addition to adding fields to the job recommendation to accommodate our partnership with ReadySub, we also needed to have the ability to let districts manage and update existing employees' information. So if you open up any of your employees under employee information, you will see those same fields, ReadySub position and location, are visible on the employee information menu. So you can come in here and update any existing employees, not just people you hire. So same idea. And okay, so keep that simple. All right, what's next? Let's go to page 3 of the release notes. Applicant utilities. Oh, archive. This one's kind of exciting. I've often had districts ask me, is there a way to not archive employees when we use the archive tool? Well, now you have the ability to not archive them. And what we actually did is we set it by default to not archive them, and you have to choose to actually include them in your archive. So there is an additional option included on the list when you're doing an archive. So if you want to include employees in your archive, you just have to check that final box when you're running an archive. Okay. All right, we're almost done. We're moving on to export information. We've added some new ones and we've updated some existing ones. I'll just quickly highlight a few of the exports that I find helpful or interesting. One export that I like and that you may or may not be aware of is we have one called Applicant's Job Applied. And this one is particularly helpful because it's really the easiest way and oftentimes the only way to find out if an applicant has removed themselves from a job. You know, we can see the jobs they've applied for, but if they take themselves out of consideration, it doesn't really say anywhere except for if you go to the database or if you use this export. We recently updated this export to give you even more information. It, of course, tells you when they applied down to the second, the date and the second, but we updated it to include who originally applied. Was it the applicant or did someone else by using the job utilities tool? And when did they, if they remove themselves, like if there's a check here under the remove column, when was it and who did it? Was it the applicant or was that action, did that action happen with the job utilities tool? Because if it's anybody's name other than the applicant, then that lets you know that that action happened under the job utilities tool with the assign jobs tool. That's kind of a helpful export information report. I like to also mention when dealing with exports, any export can be modified and customized quickly and easily, typically. Just let us know. It used to be that, there might be a fee. Anymore, that's not true. We just need to know what you need or what you're looking for. The data is pretty easy to put here and quick. We just need specifics from you, what you're looking for and what you're needing. And it's actually, Deb and I enjoy trying to help you get what you need. So don't hesitate to ask. Anyway, we also updated this applicant interview questions to include the minimum and maximum values. On a side note, when it comes time to add the minimum and maximum values, if you're a district that has a ton of interview questions already loaded on your site, I would suggest that you export this out and maybe decide what those values are. And if you want to just send us the Excel version of your stuff with your values that you want, we could load that data for you rather than you going to the lookup tables and opening each question one at a time and entering the data. That should save you some time. We have a couple exports that may be helpful. We've added an export here that just quickly identifies all of your users on your site that have the role of employee. Right now, it's very simple, user ID, name, and if the role is true or not. If you find that you need more information like their email or address or anything added, let us know. We can modify that export for you quickly. We also did the same with the substitute role. And the last export I wanted to kind of make mention is this personnel export. It includes the ready sub fields because I'm going to be teaching any of the districts that are using the ready sub solution how to use this export to manage their data. So when they have questions of why someone's not on one of the syncs or why someone is and how to remove them, this will be their go-to list. Because you can see all the key fields are here. It'll show them locations, exchange ID, and the roles all appear here. But even if you're not a Ready Sub client, this can be a helpful tool when you're setting up supervisors and you want to make sure they have access to the right jobs. We teach you that they all need their location should match the jobs you want them to view. So if you look them up and you see right away they don't have a location, that lets you know, oh, well, I need to go to employee information and add a location. But if they don't have the role of employee, you won't be able to look them up in employee information. So this could be a helpful tool in helping you determine maybe why someone's not seeing jobs. I am working on a second report that will have all the supervisor roles as well. Just haven't gotten that one done yet. It's a little tricky because there's 9 supervisor roles. So it takes a little longer to build that one. Okay, we're getting close, guys. Just a few things under lookup tables and system utilities. All right, lookup tables. Let's start at the top. Interview questions, talked about that. The minimum and maximum values. This is where you would go to set those up. You got them right here. You just enter what you want those to be, and this is where you could go to edit that or make changes. In our March update, we talked about the ability to set up sort orders for your questions. That's this field here. If you missed that and need help with that, this is where you do that. With ReadySub, we've got a table now where you set up your job classifications. They're listed here. We've got a table for your positions. We've got a table for your ReadySub locations. And in my release notes, this is where I talked about there's a typo. It should be positions employee, not positions applicant. Nested within those tables, you have the option to connect your job classification to your positions. So our math teacher belongs to the teacher job classification. It links all that together. That's how we know that ready sub position connects to our employee position. The system, it all puts all those pieces together. And this is also where we tell the system, yeah, a math teacher qualifies for a substitute or not. So those are some fields that were added kind of in the background that do kind of the magic thinking. Right. And last but not least, another very important update, I think, that will alleviate headache for users has to do with user accounts. And some of you will know right away why I think this is important. It used to be when you would go to user accounts and you would look at an account, you'd open it and you'd see the user's account. It's like, oh, I'm looking at Thomas Abelman. He's a guest, he's a registered user, he's a subscriber. Awesome. I can make my changes. And then immediately, if I went to look at somebody else's, used to be I'd press user roles and the screen would stay open and I'd still see guest, registered user, subscriber, because it would cache to the previous user's roles. Well, Dave, our awesome kind of lead programmer, he caught on to the caching problem and said that's unacceptable because sometimes it led to mistakes with roles, and that's been fixed. So now when you come here, it knows to refresh, not to cache. You got to reselect the portal every time, which is a good thing, and it's going to show you the actual roles for the actual user. So now I'm looking at Miss Brandy Anderson's roles, and I'm seeing she's an applicant, an employee, an interviewer, and a job interviewer. So no more caching and no more confusion. And I see I have a comment. Yes, this alone right here is huge. I think this and the user files not getting put in or sticking with the applicant are my two favorite updates. And I owe it all to Dave. You guys don't know Dave yet, but he is the master programmer and he is the genius. I was told on some of these updates that you guys got in the past, oh, that's 100 hours. I can never do that. And it took Dave less than an hour. So, and I have to toot his horn for one quick minute. When he saw this, his first words were, a user's experience has to be positive, and we can't have stuff like this happen. And so that's his level of commitment to all of you guys. He wants to fix the little things that drive all of us nuts. And so little by little, Deb and I are giving him those things to fix. And his commitment to you is to get those things cleaned up, those little things that we've learned to live with that drive us nuts, because he doesn't want people to be frustrated. And I just appreciate that. It's so nice to have programmers that care about you guys, that don't want you frustrated. So every day I thank him because it just makes it a pleasure to come to work when you have teammates that just want things to be good. So anyway, just want to say that. So that is this update. Like I said, we have another one coming in September with lots more improvements. We're whittling away our suggestion list. We also have an update in ProDev coming out in August. And so we're busy. And we've got the new, the SDS version of jobs that I was told by Joe he wants to have completely finished in August. I'm going, okay, it's like you're working magic that I'm just holding my breath. But we'll see. I hope that's true. Okay, I'm going to quit talking and I'm going to open things up for for questions now, or for Deb to take over because I need a drink of water. Any questions? And it's under an hour. It's only 39 minutes. And if you don't have questions, you are always free to go, or you can email myself or Deb, and we can talk to you privately about anything or clarify. Or if you just want to set up a time with us to chat about things, you know, we're here. We're here to help. I know this is an interesting year, an interesting summer season. If you want to do a little problem solving, we're here to help with that as well. Thank you for your time today and listening to me ramble. It's been a while since I've done a webinar. I'm feeling a little rusty. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you very, very much.